Welcome to the Jisc AoC Conference podcast mini-series. I'm Paul McKean, I'm the Director of Further Education, Skills and Training at Jisc. And today we're going to be talking about the future of assessment. And joining me to talk about that is Olly Newton, Executive Director, Edge Foundation, and Dr. Rebecca Conway, Director of Research and Innovation at NCFE. Welcome both of you.
Hello.
Hi, thanks Paul.
To kick us off, we're now a quarter of the way through the 21st century. How has assessment changed this century? If we start with yourself, Rebecca.
Yeah, sure. So I was actually at college when Curriculum 2000 came in, so I feel like I've seen so much change in my period, since being a student through to working in the sector. But continuity and change, I think it's fair to say as well. So we've seen I think an increase in external summative assessment, and particularly in the VTQ, the vocational and technical qualifications side of the educational space. More and more exams, things like T-levels, driven by those external written examinations. And that's because of the connection to accountability, assessment and accountability and that close relationship. Really hard to get away from those high stakes examinations in the current system. In terms of change, we've got the advent of technological advances as well. So on-screen assessment, it's been a slow uptake, but recent reports from OCR, AQA, all the examination boards, we're looking now at 2025, 2030 GCSEs are going to be on screen. So that feels like a positive change to me.
Olly, yourself.
Yeah, so just building on that, I think, I like that theme of kind of change, but also weirdly a step back. So, when you look at the subject mix that was introduced in the EBAC by the lovely Michael Gove, and you look at the curriculum that was introduced in the 1911 Board of Education, they're the same, except the 1911 one is slightly broader because it has technical drawing in it. So it's like we're kind of going forward, but we're kind of going back. So I think in assessment terms, Rebecca's absolutely right, like more big tests, more written tests, and that's been a real challenge because I don't think it draws out all of young people's talents that could be drawn out by some oral assessment, some project work, and those are the kind of skills that employers keep telling us that they need after all. And I think absolutely right in the vocational space, it would be really lovely to see vocational education kind of standing on its own 2 feet and saying, like, we don't have to just do what academic education does because that's like the gold standard. We can do our own thing. So yeah, we're already experts in testing in practical ways, in gathering experience from employers. We don't just have to move to endpoint assessment and big written exams because that's what's done in the academic world.
Absolutely.
So we know, thanks for them responses. In light of the DFE's current consultation on assessment and curriculum review, what are your thoughts on the things that we should be thinking about as organisations generally and the colleges themselves that should be included in that feedback? If I start with yourself.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I'm kind of excited by, in principle, the curriculum assessment review, but everything I'm seeing in terms of engagement is kind of pointing to it being quite vanilla, quite kind of managerial. Like, we'll take the existing system and we'll shuffle some papers around, we'll make it a little bit simpler. All welcome stuff. But to my mind, we should be thinking in a bit more of a radical way, at least thinking about kind of broader options like a baccalaureate type model that would be very different, would have breadth for longer, would have a much wider range of assessment styles, and really multimodal assessment. So absolutely we need written exams, I'm not saying we don't, but they should be one tool in the kind of assessment box, even for academic subjects, alongside project work, extended project qualifications. And so I guess my big push would be for the curriculum assessment review to consider some of those broader options. And some of them are pretty simple, like the extended project qualification is there. It was a legacy of the 14 to 19 diplomas, which I worked on the DFE back in the day. We've all been around that table. So they're already part of performance tables, they're already part of the current system. Even something as simple as saying every young person gets the opportunity to do an EPQ or an HPQ at the GCSE level would make a massive difference.
Yeah, I think I really agree with what you're saying, Olly, in terms of multimodal assessment. External high-stakes written exams, really important for certain things, but they should only be part of the assessment landscape, and particularly in those areas where, like in vocational and technical, you're actually looking to assess quite practical things, and you want to see what the learner knows and what they can do. So what I'm really hoping to see out of this consultation, actually, is just to get completely back to basics. Like, what are we doing assessment for?
Absolutely.
when we understand what we're doing assessment for and the purpose, and when we really interrogate what good looks like for our learners, then we should build a curriculum and assessment model around that, and not use it for accountability or anything else. Just, the learner, it has to be at the centre of the new system.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I was talking to an academic who works on computer science assessment, and he was telling me that out of all the countries he could find in the world, England is the only country that does computer science assessments as a written test. And when you think about it, you take one step back, you're like, what is happening here? Like, why are you writing about the theory of writing the code when you could just write the code? So yeah, there's definitely some things that are, to pick up your first point, Paul, like drawn from the 19th century that still are hanging around today, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a really good point. We've read as just the review ourselves, and I think the penultimate question kind of says, how can technology enable what we're trying to do in this space? But there seems to be a missing link for me around digital skills. Any comments on the lack of anything related to digital skills within that review?
Yeah, I mean, I think digital skills and other cross-cutting skills don't seem to have been picked up very well. So alongside that, I'd say kind of problem solving, team working, the kind of broader things that are championed by people like Skills Builder, where they don't fit into an individual subject box necessarily, but that's something that we'd expect all young people to have, which makes them a bit harder to fit in.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been thinking the same at NCFE. We're really focused on digital skills and all those other key skills that are, vital for life and work. And when you think about AI at the moment, it feels like there's quite a lot of unknowns actually in the next 10, 20 years. The way we can really prepare young people and learners actually of all ages for the future is to make sure that they have those core transferable skills. So your communication, look at, I know we're going to discuss AI in more detail in the session today, but if you look at AI, what's really key is writing really good prompts. So that requires those communication skills and that knowledge of how to interact with technology. So I think it's absolutely essential that we make sure that those skills come through in the consultation.
Yeah, and I think there's a real parallel between digital skills and creative skills here.
Absolutely.
So the creative lobby are very clearly saying it's not just about more people doing dance GCSE, it's about increasing creativity, which tends to come out top of those kind of skills that employers are looking for right across the board. Whether you're a geographer or a historian or a mathematician, you're doing it in a creative way, you're using creative techniques, and it's exactly the same with digital. Like, there's a risk that it gets pushed into how many kids are taking computer science GCSE, the answer to which is shockingly low, but that isn't the whole answer. We also need everyone to be digitally enabled no matter what they're going to go on to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really key point, Ollie, and again, I think it's a part of our response to the review is the importance of digital vocational skills. So it is the digital skills that are career specific.
Exactly.
So whatever vocation you're going into, they will be very different. And it's a question to me is, how do we enable the current model to assess them skills?
Yeah, so I think it is going to require a lot of bravery in terms of developing tools that actually reflect the normal way of working for people going forward. I mean, there is such a disconnect. I'm just thinking back to what you were saying about computer science and written exams. There's a disconnect sometimes between assessment methods and what we're doing in terms of teaching and learning. We really need to make sure that we reflect the learner's normal way of working, and reflect things in a way that feels coherent. I'm an assessment specialist, so I bang the drum for assessment. But when it's done really well, and we can break down that barrier between assessment and learning, and digital tools are a really key way to do that, I think, and particularly when we're assessing these new digital technologies.
Anything you want to add, Al?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that seems exciting in this space is kind of how particularly AI might kind of drive some positive changes in that space. So it feels like when we look at the kind of assessments that people really like, they're all quite labour intensive. So typically I was listening to somebody talking about their learning journey through from like primary school to doing a PhD, and they said that the only time they really felt like listened to and personalised was in the Viva at the end of their PhD, where they were sitting with people who were experts in the area talking as equals. And obviously that's an amazing experience, not one that many people get, and it's only one off. And also it's incredibly labour intensive because you've got to bring together the experts. But is there something that AI could do to help to recreate that a little bit more, not in exactly the same way? You're never going to recreate the world experts, but could you have a chat with 3 top geographers in an AI environment about your geography homework and really kind of get into that same level of discussion in the future? Could that be a way to kind of bring some of the the really positive, really impressive bits of assessment, which we know are labour intensive, to many more young people at different stages of their learning.
Absolutely, and thinking about the way that apps and other technologies can actually make that manageable and scalable. Those really fantastic, the Viva, all those sort of one-on-one and small group assessment methods. How can we do those at scale? Because that's the reason that we have this reliance on written exams. Quite easy to whack 100, 200, 300 learners into an exam hall. More difficult to do the more interesting stuff. So
absolutely.
we need to rise to the challenge and find ways to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think your point earlier, Rebecca, about kind of who's the assessment for is really important. When you look at kind of things that are popular with us as adults, like Duolingo, let's take. I'm learning Dutch on Duolingo, having a wonderful time, really enjoying it. And I choose to do assessments every day, but I do them because it's telling me what I need to know, and it's making me improve and making me feel good. I'm not sending them off into the void and then getting just a single mark back and being like either happy or sad with myself, which doesn't really take me anywhere. So I think the thing that is different about that, and it's very technology enabled, is it's very personalized, and it's very clear that I'm doing them to get better at the thing that I'm trying to get better at, not for my school's performance tables, for a random reason, for a government thing. It's kind of, the purpose is very clear.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to that well-being point as well around this whole consultation. And I know we've heard from Jackie Smith this morning who's raised this. So you're not stressed every day when you take your Duolingo test because you're used to it. It's part of your integrated learning, teaching and assessment. The app's teaching you, you're learning, and it's assessing you at the same time. And I think if we can kind of normalise those assessment opportunities through these different mediums, it will make it a lot easier for learners to really show us what they know and what they can do.
Yeah. Right, there's been a lot of discussion in the sector around AI, and it's been mentioned a few times by yourselves already. What's the kind of relationship between assessment and academic integrity from an AI perspective? Let's start with you, Ollie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a challenge we've been particularly picking up from our colleagues in higher education, where this kind of hit first, where it's very tempting, I guess, to get AI to write you a different version of an essay about something. And I think right from the start, there was kind of two schools of thought on this. One was basically from more traditionalists, I guess, to say, well, look, this is the ultimate proof. We just need to go back to exam halls, no books, just, no phones, just sit and write. Which you'll tell from my parody that I don't agree with. Or the other way is to think, this is the technology they're going to be using in the workplace anyway. Let's accept that, and let's think about different assessment that then brings that out. So if you need to write the essay and then you need to present about it, you need to defend your ideas, you need to discuss it with your group, all of those things can't be AI'd because you need to have understood the material. So for me, it's another argument for multimodal and another argument for building that into a broader process of learning and developing those broader skills.
Absolutely, and we've actually just funded some research at NCFE. I'm working for the music press now.
Your new side gig.
But NCFE, we've just funded some research from the Open University, which speaks to that actually, and it's good empirical research, which says, look, we can try all we like to try and detect AI. Ultimately, it's going to keep evolving. We've seen so many different iterations of ChatGPT, over the last couple of years. What we need to do is actually find ways to assess our AI proof. So things that are really context specific.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where the learner can work with AI maybe going forward, in a way that we expect they will in their work and in their education. But they're not. AI is not inhibiting our ability to see what that learner knows and what they can do, and therefore inhibiting our ability to give them a certificate for that.
That's very wise.
Yeah, just building on that, I come from an era when calculators were banned in assessment because it was seen as cheating. Do you think we're moving into a space where there could be AI enabled examinations, because of course people will be using it in the workplace when they move into a job? What's your thoughts on that, Ollie?
I mean, I think we already saw during COVID a real change, didn't we? Particularly in HE around open book exams, and it feels like that's kind of the step in between, like the calculator thing, and then there was the kind of orthodoxy of like you can do the written exam, but you have to do everything from your head, and that was very much how it was when I was studying. And then it was like, well, you're never going to be in that situation, but you do need to really interpret that. So let's just let you have the book and do it. And it feels like potentially AI is then the next step on from that. And as you say, I think realistically the most important thing is what you said earlier, Rebecca, that the situation within learning mirrors to a large extent with kind of training bumpers what they're going to face in the real world. Otherwise, you're going to get people who are coming out with the technology and approaches of 20 years ago into the workplace. We'd never allow that in technical education. You wouldn't allow gas safety standards of 1978 to be taught for now. So why are we doing that in the kind of academic and the kind of broader education?
Absolutely, and not to be alarmist, but AI is already used in assessments. So Olly's Duolingo lessons, all these questions are AI generated, and the learning is adaptive. It's looking at what words you're getting correct, what words you're struggling with. It's writing new learning pathways for you. It's assessing you in a different way. We're also seeing that with adaptive testing. In Wales and in Scotland, we've got core adaptive testing in schools now. So it's actually already being used in assessments, and we're all the awarding organisations like NCFE, we're all looking internally at how we can use AI to enhance our assessment work and also feed into better teaching and learning as well, in terms of improving efficiencies and doing what we can to make the very most of this technology.
And is that a sort of roadmap or a kind of direction of travel towards more personalised assessment, to actually assess people at the time they're ready to be assessed, rather than this Monday morning on a day in June, for example?
Absolutely. I think really getting a smooth pathway between diagnostic assessment for every single learner through to the end of their learning and their teaching programme is really key. I think that's what we're going to see in the next few years ahead. These adaptive tests in Wales and Scotland are personalised tests, just as Duolingo is. So when we do that initial assessments with learners at the beginning, we can actually tailor learning pathways that meet their needs specifically. And I think that's absolutely essential if we're going to really support learners in doing the absolute best that they can, and find ways through to the next stage of learning for them.
Yeah, I think that would be such a positive move. Something like more like the kind of music grade exams, where you can take them when you're ready, and then you can move on to the next one. Powered by AI to make that doable at a scale, I think would be very powerful. I think it would also be really powerful if we could unlock something that is done, I think, better in some European countries than here, which is kind of recognition of prior learning. So here, if you know 80% of how to do a job, and you need the last 20%, you get put back into an apprenticeship to do the 100% of the course, which is boring for you and expensive. If we could have something that's AI powered to have those tests and sign you off on the units or the level that you know already, and then top you up, it would be quicker and more efficient. It's not going to be perfect, but it'd be a lot better than everyone just doing the whole thing again.
Absolutely.
I mean, that leads me into another review that's taking place at the moment, the dawn of Skills England, and their first report, which I think is really great, and it's Jackie Smith's already mentioned this morning, good direction of travel. One of the things in their early report talks about the skills mismatch, but it lends itself to long award-bearing qualifications and doesn't take on the flexibility that you've just described, Olly. And I think there's real potential for all of us who are participating to feed that back, to say it's about flexible, it's about the accreditation for prior learning and teaching to that 10%, 20% gap, because that's going to be less of a drain on the public purse.
Absolutely right.
It's going to enable that person to be more productive, because they're going to be back in the workforce more effectively and swiftly. Any other thoughts on that kind of the Skills England response that may come from this space?
Yeah, so I think I agree with what you're saying, Paul, but I don't think we should be too negative about it, because I think the lifelong learning entitlement is really powerful. And actually what that is indicating is that we're going to move towards bite-sized learning. So I think the under the original sort of outline of the lifelong learning entitlement, I think it was 30 credit units you could kind of go through. So whilst it's not true personalised learning, we are actually giving people the option to pick something from, I was going to say over here, but obviously realising we're doing an audio podcast. Pick something from, engineering. Maybe you want to go in a slightly different way. Pick something from computer science, and you can choose that individualised pathway that works for you, and you can do it over 4 years. So as you're, we do ask a lot of kids, don't we, at 18, that they want to know, they know exactly what they want to do. With this new LLE, we actually do have that opportunity to give people a little bit more time and to pick out a personalised pathway. So I think we're actually, this is kind of, to me, personalised learning light. And hopefully we'll move over to that more comprehensive and true sort of Duolingo style personalised learning. But I feel like that is quite positive in the Skills England report, and I think we should continue to bang the drum for giving people the flexibility to choose the pathways that work for them.
And I think the fact that it's been delayed by another year means that we're going to be better prepared for it. So it's not a negative, it's the government behind it, but it means that we're better prepared. Any comments for yourself on that?
Yeah, a few thoughts on that. So I think that point is really important, and I think one of the things we've known for a long time in terms of kind of combating the rise of the robots, as people were talking about it, like the human skills that we talked about, but the other is finding those kind of areas where different sectors or areas kind of connect up. So rather than just being trained in one area, you're the person who's making the connection between the energy systems and the green stuff, or kind of picking those units. I think really kind of helps to distill that. More generally on Skills England, I think the kind of work they're doing on the kind of understanding and publishing data about the skill shortages is really valuable, and we've been kind of asking for a long time since UKCS's demise for somebody to do that. I am worried about whether they're going to have any teeth to do anything about it. And I think the kind of signals of them being an executive agency of the department, being headed by a director level post, like these are not positive signals in terms of them having kind of enough to go and knock on the door of, say, the Permanent Secretary of Health and say, we need to invest more in nurse training, or the same with MOD or others. So I would be encouraging kind of government to kind of just put a bit more power behind their elbow. They're going to have all the data, but other than publishing it and kind of shaming people, what are they then going to be able to do to fill those skills gaps?
Right, great. I mean, I think that's a great segue. We've got a couple of minutes left, so just to wrap up, we have got a new government. We've got a new minister who spoke this morning very eloquently about what they're looking to do. If you had 1 minute with the minister, any thought about what you would be saying to her from an assessment perspective? I'll start with you, Ollie.
Yeah, I would say don't go too vanilla. Make sure that the curriculum assessment review is looking at genuinely radical options. They don't have to happen next year and scare the workforce. This could be a 10-year plan, a bit like with diplomas, to move to something more radical over a series of steps. Same with Skills England. Like, this is getting to the level of a crisis with the kind of the amount of skill shortages that are being reported. Let's think about a radical option there. We've suggested as an example, should we have a senior skills advisor in government, similar to the chief medical officer, who would have a statutory role to spot these gaps and to be directing the orchestra to try and address them.
Rebecca, final word for you.
Yeah, so I think for me, just to reiterate what I said earlier, actually, in terms of accountability. So decouple accountability from assessment. Assessment should be about assessing what the learner knows and what they can do. That has to be at the very heart of this system. So I'd really encourage the government to get back to basics, actually, and just think about what they're trying to do with assessment. And I think if they're really sure about this well-being point that they've been discussing quite extensively now, and I think it's really important that we do focus on learner well-being. They need to think about introducing that diversity of assessment methodologies that really work for the full range of learners. Some learners are great with exams, some need projects, some thrive in oral assessment, others don't. So I would really be thinking about what we're doing, why are we doing it, and how can we make it as flexible as possible to meet all those learner needs.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks,
Rebecca.
You
so much.
Thank you.
Hopefully, for you listening, it's given you some thought-provoking ideas about the future of assessment and things that you need to consider in your own institution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.